Hello and welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. We have four guests on today, some of the central team from Manor Hall Academy Trust, who are very kindly going to share stories of dancing, of connection, of psychological safety, and all sorts of other things, which is what they have in a thriving group of schools. And it's really exciting to hear what is going on where staff retention is high, there is connection, and and actually people want to stay because they are valued, they are seen and they are heard. So we're going to launch straight in. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing that's different?
Thanks, Rowena. My name's Phil Harrison. I'm very proud to be the CEO of Manor Hall, and I've been in post since the 1st of September 2024. I inherited a group of people and a group of schools who had a big heart. So we talk about the trust from an emotive point of view all the time, that it's full of just really good people who want to do the very best for our children. We're 16 schools at the moment, all specialist provisions, a real range of needs for the young people we serve, and just shy of 1,000 employees. And I think that the first point I'd like to point us in the direction of really is our underpinning values and how important they are for our people. So at the end of 2024, we went through a consultative process and came up with some very important words that we live and breathe all the time, which is everyone belongs, learns and grows. So we try and anchor our decision making on those words and that mission. And one of the things that's really important is that we're really consistent about using those words. So, for example, when we do a piece of work around policy, and we anchor that onto how the implications are for everyone within our organisation. So we're not a trust just for leaders, we're not a trust just for teachers, we're a trust for everyone, and everyone's role is valued equally and with the importance it deserves, because none of our schools can function without a variety of people contributing to the day-to-day organisation of the provisions.
I love that. And one of my passions really comes from Brené Brown, because she talks about belonging a lot. And I think she talks about that being such a fundamental requirement for both us as adults, but also for the pupils. And I wonder, what was it? Was it the pupils who brought you round to that idea of belonging, or was it the adults? How did you come to that word of belonging being so important?
Yeah, well, it was a consultative process for everyone that Kate led us through. But I think that there's something very special about those words resonating with the senior central team of the trust. And it's not just a sequence of buzzwords, it's actually something that really resonates with us as human beings. And that's why it's easier for us to live and breathe with that. And yeah, thanks for, pointing us in the direction of the pupils. Our schools, by their very essence being specialist provisions, it absolutely should be about everybody feeling like they belong. And some of our young people have had negative previous educational experiences, unfortunately, and that's not, I'm not criticising any provision. Some of our young people are really complex, and in some of the provisions they've been in previously, it hasn't worked out well for them. And by the definition of our schools, it's really important that those young people belong, and therefore the adults should work in the same kind of environment as well. So Kate might be able to talk a little bit more, or would be able to talk a little bit more about that consultative process.
Yeah, so we led a series of workshops across the organisation where I must admit that the majority of what we were receiving through the workshops was about pupils. So pretty much 100% was about pupils. But it wasn't until we started really thinking about what our culture needed to be, was that actually well-being is about everyone. The pupils will not have great well-being if the staff haven't got great well-being, and our people haven't, or the parents or the people that we're working with and inviting into the school. So when we landed on those words, everyone belongs, learns and grows, it genuinely felt like a eureka moment, like that is everyone. As a member of Manor Hall, I should belong and be able to learn and grow. So should a pupil at any one of our schools. So should a parent. And I think it was just a bit of a light bulb moment. And then it kind of rapidly grew legs and just became the words on everyone's lips very, very quickly. And I think it's just given everyone within our organisation a real anchor into what Manor Hall is all about.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd love Kelly to share something she was saying before we came on air, because there's something about Manor Hall where, schools can be very chaotic, reactive, exhausting places. But actually, Kelly gave a story of the celebratory nature and the sort of love of being there and the fun that gave it another side to what you're doing as well, that I think enhances that sense of belonging for people and the fact that people are seen as humans. Do you want to just tell us about that, Kelly?
Oh, so I think this is partly how this conversation today came about. So Kate and I were delivering a session on staff wellbeing, and it was a cocktail session, and we were making a cocktail called the Happy Employee, and we were talking about the different elements of the ingredients could be valuing everybody's role and treating them with respect, or it could be one ingredient could be giving autonomy over work. So we kind of came up with the idea at the last minute that we put cocktail music on. So as the people were coming into the session, CEOs, CFOs, we had like the Coca-Cabana playing, and everybody had to do a little dance as they were coming in. And actually, they weren't forced; they all actually enjoyed it. And I remember you, Kate, saying how the day was so professional and official, and it was actually people's faces, they just melted as they walked into the room, and they felt like it was a safe space to open up and to talk. And I think that also resonates at the central team as well. When schools come to visit us, the first thing we do is we make them a cup of tea. We offer them something to eat. We all kind of huddle round them, a bit like when you go home to visit family after moving out. It's a safe space where we nurture them, and they feel like they are important to us. And if they're thriving, it means that they can then support their wider teams to thrive, who in turn support the pupils. And I know that Phil was going to talk a little bit about psychological safety, and I think that's something we offer without perhaps even realising we were doing it. We're not afraid to hold our hands up and say, actually, I need to learn. I did something wrong. Can we learn together? Does anybody know? Can you offer me advice? So it feels like we are that team, that supportive collaboration. But yeah, I think Phil's probably better than me at talking about psychological safety. So I shall pass the baton.
Go, Phil.
I suppose the comment I'd make about creating that culture is I think you need to be really deliberate about doing that. So I don't think it happens by magic. I think you need to expose people's teams' anxieties about speaking their truth or feeling defensive about work, or maybe being worried about being criticised. So I think you need to expose that and talk about it, and getting to know people is the precursor for that, and creating frameworks to get to know people. So some people are naturally affable and will share a lot, and some people won't. And for those people who won't, you need to create those structures to do that. So that might be through agendaed meetings, it might be by deliberately finding time with those people, but it's important to understand them and then expose where their vulnerabilities might lie, and talking about how you can support people to do that, and deliberately inviting feedback up the perceived accountability chain to make sure that you listen. And then I would say being really consistent in your response with people. So where you're inviting people to give you feedback, if there's stuff that you don't like, particularly as a leader, it's about being really consistent in your responses to that, and offering thanks for the feedback, and being really truthful in your truth, and not skirting around issues and talking about the reasons you might have made decisions, or trying to help people to understand that. So I think it's all right to say the word psychological safety, but you actually have to do something about it in order to make that happen.
Yeah, and I love you mentioned something there, which is people need, you didn't put it in quite these words, but people need to be seen and they need to be heard. And actually, I think we can't be the best version of ourselves if we're not seen, heard, and valued. And you clearly put quite a high value on just seeing people at the start and then working from that and understanding people and knowing people.
Yeah, having been a busy head teacher at one point in my career, I'm not blind to the fact that schools are incredibly busy organisations. But I think what I suppose my own personal journey would be, you need to be deliberate about making that time to hang out with people, and that's leadership just as much as creating a policy or holding somebody to account through a line management meeting or whatever. Just hanging out and listening and being is really important, and it gives you loads of insight alongside a bucket load of data that we've got across schools. So whether that be particular pupil progress in an area, or staff absence rates, or health and safety data, or whatever, all those things are really important, but only combined with the kind of authentic listening of the people on the ground. And also knowing that, with 1,000 employees, we can't possibly listen to, or I can't possibly listen to 1,000 people, but examples give you a cue in to ask further questions, which unpick situations that you just want to help people make it better. And I think it's, like, I suppose, I don't think my job's that hard, really. It's about just creating conditions for other people to thrive, and that then helps young people to thrive. So it's just about finding systems to get that information to make those sensible decisions, I hope and think.
Yeah, no, I love that. And actually, there was a piece of research recently saying that where the teachers are doing better, the students can achieve up to 20% better. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? But they number crunched it and found the proof of it. Kate, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it was on something Phil's just said, and I think psychological safety has really brought a lot into our organisation. But another thing is that leaders need to also help their teams by also having that psychological safety with each other and modelling really good behaviour and culture, and also a good work-life balance themselves. So I remember when Phil joined us, he was really sharing a lot about the things that he got up to at the weekend, and then that then allowed us to share what we're into, which then creates that connection. But also 20 years ago, leaders were the first in the morning, and then they were the last home at night. I remember my manager at the time, 20 or 22 years ago now, used to dry her hair with 2 hair dryers because it meant that she was just being quicker and could just work. Like, as leaders, it's our responsibility to not do things like that, and to not be the first in and the last out, and to then allow our teams and our organisations to not feel like that's expected of them. And that's psychological safety as well.
Yeah, really, really important. I love that. And I think I've had people on the podcast before talking about how it's almost a badge of honour. The longer hours you do, the more important you must be, and all of that. But actually, it doesn't work that way. And the research even backs up that if we take proper breaks and go home and switch off and do things for ourselves, we're going to be so much more productive and enjoy it more and be more creative for the pupils. And they don't want burnt out teachers. Laura, I'm aware that you've been sitting there patiently while we've all been chatting. Talk to us about prevention.
Yeah, I mean, I always say prevention is more important than intervention, because quite often we just act when a person has become absent, and then we're, of course, trying to help them and support them. But it would be really great, wouldn't it, if we never got to that position in the first place, particularly, obviously, with the mental health related absence. So, so when I think about the well-being pillars, if you like, the kind of physical, mental, social and financial, sometimes we focus on one a lot and maybe not the others so much. So something that I'm particularly focusing on at the moment is that social side of well-being, those working relationships, and how you feel valued by your organisation and by your manager, that sort of open door leadership. That's where I find a lot of my conversations going at the moment with the leadership teams within our schools. It's really, really important, isn't it? That prevention piece. And it all ties into what everyone said really around that psychological safety. It's not just a buzz phrase. It really is those conditions we create for a person to feel safe at work in a mental sense as well as a physical sense. Really, really important.
So important. There was a discussion going on earlier this week with some CEOs and head teachers about why is it apparently difficult to treat our staff in schools as humans? And it really makes me so sad. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
I just remember going to a seminar, and it was about, why do we not trust people? Everyone in our team has got people who are dependent on them, whether that be parents or children or interests and mortgages and rent to pay. And then when they come to school, school, literally in this term, but their workplace, we're kind of managing their attendance and where they are and at what time they're turning up and stuff. And I think that completely leads into trust, doesn't it? We should be managing people's outcomes, not their attendance and their, all of those things that just you can kind of get tied up in as a manager, and they take up a lot of time.
No, I think my perspective is that the overwhelming majority of people who've come to work in the education sector and therefore public service have done so because they're really good people, and typically their behaviours would be by default really good. So then if you use that as a starting point as a leader for where behaviours are not so good or people feel stressed or worried, it's because they're stressed or worried and they're working within a system which means their behaviours are not them. So I think there's a really nice, I think it's a podcast with Sir Steve Peters on the chimp guy. If you look at him, and he talks about if you think about 3 words that describe you, they are you, and everything else is it's conditions that have made you not to be like that. So I'd like to think by nature, I'd like to think I'm a kind person, but if I act in a not kind way, it's because things are happening which are changing my behaviours in that situation. So I think from a system point of view, there's clearly accountability as a stress. So people in mainstream primary schools worried about SATs results or phonics tests, or in secondary progress 8, or whether that be Ofsted. And we have to support our people to rationalise how important those things actually are, and knowing in their schools if they're doing a really good job. That's a really thing to be celebrated, not a metric of something. So if your progress 8 is above average, but you're really sad inside, that's not okay. We need to work that through with people to make it okay. So I think in summary, why some people are finding it hard to not treat people well is, I think, because of external stresses, not because of who they are. So we should help them.
Wow, I want to just grab that. And so I have a course called 5 Minutes to Thrive. So it's 5 minutes at the start of every staff meeting. And it's like a well-being fist bump, really. And it gives different strategies for schools to manage well-being for their staff. But the really interesting feedback that came at the beginning of it from staff was how difficult they found it to talk to each other, about how they are, about what's going well, their impact, their strengths. They can talk all about their children's data in their classes. They can talk about their timetable, their displays. But actually, to talk to each other as a human has been a real learning journey. And it sounds like somehow you've grasped that human side of your team, your staff. And you've got 1,000, so it's a pretty good thing. I'm just wondering, you talked at the beginning about connection and peer-on-peer support and celebrating. Kate, do you want to elaborate on whether that's also part of this?
Yeah, so it starts a few years ago, really. We put somebody from every one of our settings through a wellbeing apprenticeship because we wanted to invest some time into that and kind of up our our skills and our knowledge in that area. And then also, Kelly, you're just nearly completed, haven't you, from the central team as well? And one of Kelly's brilliant ideas was to actually create a network across the trust. And it is about what you're just saying. Sometimes it is so difficult to talk to somebody within your own setting or within your own team about something that you're going through. And it might not be because you don't like those people there. It might just be because it's genuinely difficult to talk about, or it's private, or it's something that's upset. You might not want your the lady in the classroom next to you to see you upset because, you know, it makes it difficult for you. Or so when you're part of a trust, to be able to have those economies of scale and create networks, it's quite a brilliant thing, really, because it gives you opportunities to talk to people that are not necessarily within your day-to-day, but that might have different experiences, different strengths. So within our trust, we've got a lady at one of our schools, Vicky Pinkney, who is just an absolute menopause champion. She just is so passionate about making our organisation better at understanding menopause and to ensure that our policies are brilliant. We've got people who are just genuinely passionate about health and safety or stress. We've got people who have got lived experiences of really unique situations. And it's about creating that, almost like that database, really, of what's going on and who's great at what and who enjoys what, and then connecting the dots. So if someone's having a really tricky time over at Castlewood, one of our schools, we can connect them with someone over at Finchwoods. They might be poles apart, but we've got the systems in place now for those conversations to take place.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just coming back to seeing each member of staff as a human being, because I'm very aware that the official definition of burnout is a work-related definition. And there's an awful lot of us who say that is a real concern, because there's no way that you can detach your family life, your home life, your health away from your work. Kelly, what were you going to add?
I just wanted to say, whenever we get a call to the central team, it's usually our business managers. The first thing I will always ask is, how are you? And if they're talking about, oh gosh, I've got a list of things to do. And the first thing I say to them is, just remember, you are what is important. And often, I think sometimes if you've got a difficult task or you don't quite know which way to turn, I'll say, shall we do it together? Because I think sometimes when you've got somebody to hold your hand when you're going through a particularly tricky time, it just makes it feel easier. And what we as a team try to encourage is that first impression. So if somebody comes to the central team and we're really kind, they then pay it forwards a little bit. And I remember when I was very first interviewed, there was a lady, her name was Amy, and she was so kind to me during my interview, and I was so scared that now whenever I'm supporting with interviews, I introduce myself as, I'm going to be your best friend for the next half an hour. I'm going to be your biggest champion. Whatever you need to succeed and really be successful in this next hour, I'll be there to support. And then people do pay it forwards. But I think Kate mentioned earlier before we came online about how our culture's changed. And I think it has rapidly changed, but we've made it so that people feel safe to be able to say, I don't know, or I've made a mistake. And just to give you one example, I remember when I first started with the central team, I sent a message to my line manager to say, oh my gosh, I've made a mistake. And I was anxious. I had to tell her because I wouldn't sleep. And she said to me, anybody who's never made a mistake has never done a day's work. And it was amazing. That's how I knew I'd found the right place to come and work. But yes, that was what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Well, before we finish, has anyone got anything they're burning to add into what we've said so far?
I've got two things that spring to mind. One is Kelly did exactly that when I was being interviewed, and she was ever so lovely to me, to the point at which I was doing one of the tasks and she didn't realise, so she came and talked to me for 20 minutes. So I ended up with 5 minutes to complete my task, but I still got the job but she was very lovely. So I'm very grateful to her for that.
It's a good job you got the job, Phil, isn't it? I thought you were lonely. And actually, I went in and I was talking to Phil, wanted to make him feel relaxed. And then he very politely, after a while, said, Kelly, I'm supposed to be doing my task.
All panned out in the end. And I think that my final point would be around the power of stories and the power of stories about individuals. So I think there's, creating backstops and policy and systems and structuring, making sure everybody can have an appraisal conversation and it's appropriately focused. All those things are really important, but you have to celebrate the human nature of the stuff that you do, and that reinforces behaviours. And I'd really like to share what I shared with the head teachers just before Christmas. I put a photo of my dad up on the PowerPoint screen. He's called Roy, and my title was Be More Roy. And I recounted a story of when I was a child going to his business, where he was a print manager, and they were under a really stressful time, and it was at the weekend, and I was badgering him to go and see his new printing press. And we walked in and he asked absolutely nothing at all about the stresses the business was under. And he was to every member of staff, how's your son? I know he was poorly. How's your brother? How's your sister? How's your wife? And I said to our head teachers before Christmas, that's leadership for me. That's when I learned how to be with people. So I think that's it's very personal to me, but I think really, hopefully, a lovely thing to share.
Very powerful. And I think probably on that we're going to finish, if that's okay. Obviously, if anyone would like to speak to any of you about what you're doing and how you're managing it with workload yourselves and your team, what would be the best way that they could connect with anyone from your team?
So we've got a really active LinkedIn page, so just simply search for Manor Hall Trust. We've got a website where you can contact us on an online form, which is manorhall.academy. But we'd love to talk more about this, and we love making connections with other leaders and school leaders. We'd love to hear from anyone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Laura, Kelly, Kate and Phil. That was amazing. I hope it's given lots of people an awful lot of ideas. It certainly has for me. And thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.